Hello, everyone. Let's talk about personal reinvention. Personal reinvention is so important because it's a process, and you create more success and happiness the more you do it. You don't have to wait for the outcome for the reinvention to happen. And you get there by one quality decision each day. In fact, tomorrow starting with one quality decision, you will in one day, if you do it every day, increase your happiness and your feeling of success. And success and happiness is whatever that means to you. I stand here before you today a reinvented person, and this is not the first time I've reinvented. I am now, 3 years later, after leaving my corporate trial position, I'm now a global business consultant. I'm an OD consultant for organization development. I am a live streamer. I'm a global podcaster. I'm a professional coach. I do a bunch of different things. And that reinvention came from learning in my 30s how to do it right, because I did it all wrong. In my 30s, I tried to reinvent my life. And when I'm talking about reinvention, I'm talking about it can be something small, something medium, or something large. You don't have to wholesale change your whole life. In my 30s, I made a decision to change my life because I wanted to live before I died, and I wanted to impact the planet. So I made all this hustle, all this busy work, all this stuff, and I got it. But at a price, my health broke, and it broke terribly. And it wasn't sure if I was going to make it, if I was going to live through it, and I did. So the powerful lesson I give to you, if you're going to do your personal reinvention, you need to consider if you're a leaper and a jumper, and you want to do it that way, you can. But the cost could be a rebound effect where you come back, rubber band right back to where you were, or it could come at the expense of something else, like your health or like relationships. There is science behind one quality decision each day to change your life at any age in your life, and it works. Now, I have to set the landscape for this so you understand the power of reinvention. You have to first understand that you are a miracle, and we never stop to consider that, but you are. You probably have heard this statistic before, that the chance of you being born, 1 in 400 trillion. 1 in 400 trillion, that's the statistics. And some statisticians put it higher than that. Because you are a miracle, you can do miraculous things despite your societal training and all the limitations placed on you. You can. I want you to think about the miracle of this. Today, you will breathe an average of 23,000 times. Your heart will beat an average of 115,000 times. In a given day, you talk words, roughly 7,000 to 25,000 words daily. That's the crazy machine that you are, and it's miraculous. Now, you make a staggering 35,000 decisions each day. 35,000. And you only need one to be a quality decision each day to change your life out of those 35,000. Now, to set the landscape further, you have to know what you're up against. And all of you are probably a bit schooled in personal development. You probably have known the body of work in psychology and mindset and those things. But it's also important to understand things that you are up against that are not being talked about enough, that are very important, that are shaping you even as you sit here today. Once you're aware of those, especially if you've tried a lot of personal development before and it hasn't worked, it could be these limitations that I'm going to talk about that are preventing you from doing your personal reinvention. And I call them the 4 day robbers. And the 4 day robbers, and there are going to be more, but here's how it works out. Day robber number 1 is that you are being taught by technology to be distracted. You're actually being taught by technology and your children as well to be distracted. This is a conscious business model. It's a conscious model, period. And it's rooted in something called persuasive technology. And we've seen this before in casinos. Casinos are very good about creating an environment where you stay captive in the environment, and it keeps you there. And it makes you think that things that aren't important suddenly are important. So you're not only being trained to be distracted as day robber number 1, you're being trained that what is unimportant is important. Think about social media postings. You could jet 99.9% of them, and still nothing would move the needle in your life. They're not that impactful, yet you're being trained that they are important. They are not. That is day robber number 1. Day robber number 2 is I'm too busy. and I'm going to give you this. We all understand I'm too busy, but being too busy is really not the issue. The issue is, and the science shows, you are multitasking far too much. And this multitasking is creating additional work for you, and it's making your days longer, and it's making it worse, and you're making more errors, and you're actually producing less because of your multitasking. It is not a noble endeavor at all, and the science shows this. And I'm going to give you two things to ground you. One is a saying from Gandhi. Gandhi said, life is more than an increase in speed. It's about more than an increase in speed. Have you ever gotten to the end of a day where you're like, where did the day go? I've been doing so many things, and I'm far behind. I don't understand what happened to my day. Multitasking happened to your day. I'm going to give you two names. One is Clifford Nass, and he was a professor at Stanford of communication. The other is Gerald Weinberg, a computer scientist. Totally different people, totally different bodies of research. But what they both found was that multitasking is a myth. Gerald Weinberg came up with this concept. It's called context switching. It's very important to understand this, that when you are focused on one activity, and your brain requires brain activity. And by multitasking, I don't mean you're standing over a stovetop and you're stirring two things at one time. That's not the brain activity we're talking about. We're talking about you're focusing on one activity, and then you focus on another activity, and you do that through the course of the day. You switch back and forth between the two. That is known as context switching, and it's making your life miserable, and it's hampering your progress. It's keeping you way too busy to focus on personal reinvention and the things that matter. So let's look at context switching, according to Gerald Weinberg and his science. Number one, if you take time and you focus on one activity solely without any distractions, right? No distractions. You get 100% productivity. Fair enough. Let's say you do two things. You focus on one activity, and then for 8 hours, and during the course of that 8 hours, you also decide, I'm going to check my email intermittently and respond. I'm actually going to engage my brain and do email responses. When you do that, you are now engaged in two activities where you contextually are focused on this one task, and now you contextually switch to do this, and you switch back. That's context switching between the task and the email and switching back. It is that lag time between the email and this task that creates a gap, and your brain has to regroup, it has to recalibrate, and it gets really tired doing all the switching all day. You do two tasks, you're going to lose 20% productivity. 20%. Now, let's go to three tasks. You're going to focus on your one task each day. You're going to be responding to email throughout that 8-hour day. Now you're going to plug into that another task. Let's say answering the phone, doing phone calls. Very standard. Phone calls, respond to email throughout the day, and work on my major project that day. Now, with three tasks, you're going to lose 40% productivity with context switching, and you're creating more work for yourself. Now let's grow that to 4 tasks. You have a project in front of you, you're doing email throughout the day, you're doing phone, and now you're playing with that little addictive device called your phone, with all that persuasive technology that's holding you in. 4 things. You're now losing 60% production during an 8-hour day to context switching. That's maddening. Now let's take it to 5. You're working on your one big project. You're context switching over to email throughout the day. You're answering phones. You're now playing on your phone, and you're also working on that surprise birthday party that you need to take care of for somebody. You're now up to 5 tasks a day. You are now losing a whopping 80% in productivity. So with this day robber, what do? Number one, you realize with your personal reinvention, you don't have to come anywhere near even 40 hours a week to devote to it. You can devote 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes a day to it, just fine, more time if you want. The key to it is to recognizing it's not going to happen with multitasking because other things are going to pull you away from it. What you have to do to beat back this day robber number one is to every night before the next day, every single night, pick your one quality decision for the next day and make it doable. Put it on your calendar. You're not going to be distracted because you're not going to worry about the technology around it. Number 2, you are not going to multitask around it. You're going to commit to focused attention. And the cure for all this multitasking is what they call batching, where you devote time to a specific task. A half hour solely to this task without interruption, an hour to this task, 2 hours, half day, whatever it is. For your reinvention that you decide, that quality step the night before, what you're going to do is put that in the calendar for the next day, what you're going to do. Also, when you go to sleep, it leaves your subconscious very happy because you're doing something that makes you happy, doing something to move your life forward. It's very powerful and it works. That's how you combat day robber number 2. Day robber number 3 is decision fatigue. And this is kind of fascinating because we do have the 35,000 decisions that we make daily. This goes to complex decisions. And the people associated with this research, it's John Tierney, who's a New York Times columnist, and there's also his cohort, which is Roy Baumeister. And Roy is a renowned psychologist. And they were fascinated by the fact that people grow weary when they have to make lots of decisions, including willpower. And willpower is actually a decision you make to resist something or to stay with something or stick with a program. So they got together and they wrote a book, and the book is Willpower: Rediscovering the Greatest Human Strength. And they wanted to know why people fatigue and why they settle. And this is what they found. When people are making complex decisions during a day, and say a really complex decision like a house buying decision, whether you're building it or you're buying it, they found that in their studies that so many people with so many decisions around that, eventually they just settled. They just kind of gave up and went with whatever. And they did that because they were fatigued. They found that that muscle that controls our decision making and our willpower is much like any muscle in your body, that when it's exercised fully, it becomes depleted and it needs time to rest, to recover. Your brain is no different. We think our brains are super and they work all the time. They do, but they just don't always work well all the time. They get fatigued like every other part of our body. It's just like a muscle. And they went through really great studies of studying people. They put chocolate chip cookies in front of them, and they put M&Ms in front of them, and they could resist those two. But when the other temptations came out, they gave up and they ate. Okay, they couldn't help it because they had depleted that muscle. That is decision fatigue. That's the kind of thing that you're up against. Now, what's curious about that, it not only goes to complex decisions, it also goes to a drop in glucose, they found, which is really quite fascinating. And they found when your glucose drops, so does your decision-making ability, and you start settling. Now look at your life and your personal reinvention in your life. Reinvention is about identifying parts of your life where you believe you've settled across any spectrum and realizing you're not going to settle anymore and you're going to reinvent and go for what it is you truly want this time. Decision fatigue plays into that settling because you're just too busy and too distracted and too fatigued to figure it out. So how do you beat back this day robber number 3? You make that decision, as we discussed before, the night before. Commit it on your calendar so it's not part of the mental fatigue the next day, period. And you maintain your glucose levels as best you can. If your body can tolerate protein, that's what they recommend. They say don't go to sugar, you'll crash. When you have protein throughout the day, it releases across the board in a nice even way glucose. That is so important to good decision making. So make sure you have protein throughout the day to promote that. And that's how you beat day robber number 3. Day robber number 4 is really fun. It's 2 psychologists, they're Harvard psychologists, and the names are Killingsworth and Gilbert. And what they did is they developed an app to measure happiness. And it was a small study, and they had their respondents track their happiness. And here's what they found. They found that their respondents, 46.9% of the time, reported extensive mind wandering. In fact, that 46.9% of the time, they were engaged in mind wandering, even when they were working on a task. Now, the fascinating thing is, they linked that extensive mind wandering. You say, oh, daydreaming and lost in thought. What harm is that? It's very harmful when it's extensive like that. 46.9%. And they found that that mind wandering contributed to unhappiness in large measure. And it was not only contributed to it, extensive mind wandering was a predictor for unhappiness. Why? Because think about this, if your mind wanders to that extent, what is it busy wondering about and wandering over? It's usually the vills, and they're the bad vills. The I haven't gotten to it vil. How am I going to get that accomplished vil? My concern vil. All your worries manifest in that wandering, which leads to the unhappiness, because that kind of focus leads you to feel overwhelmed, so you're not taking action. And not taking action to make your life better makes you unhappy. And that's how it all fits together. So those are the 4 day robbers I wanted you to be cognizant of. Know that you're being trained to be distracted. Know multitasking is a lie. Number 3, know that your mind will fatigue with complex decisions, so make your decision early the night before, stick to it, and keep your glucose levels high. And number 4, realize that extensive mind wandering causes unhappiness and will rob you of your personal reinvention because you'll feel stuck. You won't feel motivated. An active mind engaged in a singular task that makes you happy, makes you feel successful, that is going to motivate you so much to keep going, all right? So we now have dealt with the day robbers. Goal grooming, I want to introduce you to this very quickly. Whitaker is his name, Mike Whitaker, and he wrote a book, The Decision Makeover, and he talks about goal grooming, and it's just a very simple concept I want to leave you with. It's that never create goals for yourself that match your current circumstances. Groom your goals upward, never groom your goals downward. You have to remember that. Naysayers, what do we do when we want to do a personal reinvention and maybe we don't have support people around us, people who support it? Number one, keep your dream safe. Keep it safe, keep working your personal reinventions quietly until you've made success. Then if you want to share them, fine. Now, Abraham Maslow, the renowned psychologist, said, you have to be free of the good opinion of others if you're to ever be your full self, to be your fully actualized self, to really fully live. And he's right. The next time you're thinking about group behavior, remember this. Years ago, everybody thought smoking was the greatest thing in the world. We learned the group was wrong. It wasn't. All right? We have seen groups persecuted over time, and even today, group persecuting group. We know this is terribly wrong. The groups are wrong. So when people challenge, the group challenges your reinvention, I want you to remember this story about what group thought really is. And I love this story. And it comes from Dave Millman's book, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. He talked about a king, but I'm changing it to a queen to be representative. There was a queen who lived high on a hill in a castle, and the village people loved her. She was wise, she was fair, she was kind. Well, one day, sadly, the water in the town fountain became polluted, and every man, woman, and child in the village drank from it, and when they did, they went insane. Days passed, and the people started murmuring about their queen. She was no good, she wasn't kind, she wasn't smart, and above all, she was crazy. And they stayed away. A few days pass, and the queen says, I wonder what's going on. I'm lonely. I miss my town people. She leaves her castle, goes down the hill. It's a hot day, and she drinks from the fountain. And that night, there was such a celebration in the village because the queen had regained her sanity. Now, your reinvention means you don't drink from the common water. It's going to require uncommon decision-making and uncommon action-taking, which you can absolutely do. You know what you're up against. You're going to make that one quality decision, but because you know what you're up against, it's no match for you. You will conquer it. So take those steps every day on your quality decision to make your reinvention happen, and as you do, watch your success and happiness multiply for not only yourself, but for others as well. Thank you.